Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cynthia Johnson, and I am the Director of Established Business Services with the WBDC. And on behalf of the entire WBDC team, we want to welcome you to this afternoon's 2017 Future Forum Series discussion. And we sincerely hope that you've enjoyed the activities related to the conference today. So everybody have a good time connecting? Great, great. Our theme for the panel discussion today is forecasting corporate supplier diversity, contracting trends, and the evolving marketplace. In a few minutes, you're going to hear from two of our very successful WBEs and several of our WBDC corporate partner representatives who will share their knowledge and their experience about procurement trends and opportunities to connect with corporate decision makers. The Future Forum panel discussion was planned with each of you in mind. We consider the needs of business owners when we invited our panelists and our WBEs, and we were very thoughtful about the kinds of information you would need to know to compete in the marketplace. So we know you're going to enjoy this afternoon's discussion. It will focus on tips and tools that you can use to grow your business. And you will also hear about some success stories and best practices that have been implemented on the corporate side as well as on the WBE side. Before we begin the discussion this afternoon, we want to thank the sponsors who made this program possible. Please join me in welcoming Amelia Domingo, the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Women's Business Development Center, to the podium, and she will introduce our Future Forum sponsors. Amelia.
Hello. Hello. Thank you, Cynthia, and good afternoon to all of you. For those of you who have didn't start the day with us, and this is the first part of the day, this is what we call, as Cynthia just said, our Future Forum panel. This is the Chicago Future Forum panel, and it traveled all of our major markets. So we kicked this off in Minneapolis, and we had stops in St. Louis, Kansas City, and Milwaukee. These events brought together over 500 entrepreneurs looking to hear from corporate and public sector supplier diversity and procurement professionals, and it also brought together the women business owners in those markets to talk about the types of challenges and opportunities that they see in supplier diversity. This afternoon, we're going to close out the 2017 series, and we have a very, very dynamic panel that you will be introduced to. We're delighted you could join us for what promises to be, I assure you, a thought-provoking conversation between these dynamic women business owners and our corporate partners. We're going to learn a lot through this conversation, and I can't wait to hear their perspective on the latest trends, on what's happening with corporate supplier diversity contracting, and how it's going to impact the business owners that they work with. But before I end my introductory comments, I want to acknowledge, as Cynthia said, the sponsors who made this series possible. The Deluxe Corporation Foundation was our series sponsor. They are our education partner. And U.S. Bank was our Future Forum series sponsor. I can't thank them enough for their generous support, and I'd like you to join me in a round of applause to thank our Future Forward sponsors. Now, I have the great pleasure to introduce one of those sponsors to you, and that is the Deluxe Corporation Foundation. Representing the Deluxe Corporation Foundation is Jenny Anderson, who is the Director of Foundations and Community Affairs. Please join me in welcoming her to the podium.
Good afternoon. Isn't this a great day? I am really honored to be in this room of amazing small business owners and representatives from well-respected business organizations. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Deluxe, we are a company that is over 100 years old, and we have been primarily known as the company that manufactured checks for financial institutions. We still love our financial institution customers, US Bank, but over time we have had to address change. And so today we offer a suite of services and products for small business customers, and some of these services include logo design and website development, social media creation, and more. Sales from small business owners now represent 65% of our revenue each year. That's called change. I lead the Deluxe Corporation Foundation, and we have also changed some of our grand focus areas in response to this change. One of our major focus areas is nonprofits that provide services and mentoring to small business owners. And about 6 years ago, a couple people at Deluxe told me I should check out the WBDC. And I thought, what's a WBDC? You know, I'm in the suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota, and this is an organization headquartered in Chicago. So I did a little behind the scenes research, and I reached out to Georgia Marsh, their Chief Development Officer, and I think she thought she was on the receiving end of a prank phone call. Because I basically called and said, I think we may want to give you some money. And 6 years later, we have made several grants, and over $900,000, in fact. And, well, thanks to the WBDC for letting us partner with you, because they are so innovative. They created an online education program that makes educational, business education courses available to small business owners in, 5 countries? Amelia? Yeah. 5 countries? Okay, available 24/7, and that's great. So I just want to thank the WBDC for being a resource for small business owners, and after hearing some of the sessions this afternoon, I have even more of an appreciation for all that small business owners have to do. You wear many hats. I know they've been trying to say you don't have to wear all the hats, but you do wear a lot of hats, and we appreciate you and we really respect you. So thank you.
Thank you, dear Jenny. Jenny and Deluxe have transformed the WBDC. We are in a multi-channel platform now, and all of you know who are dealing with the cost of technology, while it brings to us a lot of information, the cost of setting up a structure like that, and we keep building on it. So I invite all of you to go to our website and look at our online demand library, which is in English and in Spanish, and you'll see at the bottom of it, powered by Deluxe. And I just want you to know that all my checks are standard blue and provided by Deluxe, and I still use them. I still use them. Okay. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Debra Jennings-Johnson, who's going to moderate this afternoon's discussion. Debra is the Senior Director of Supplier Diversity at BP America. She is responsible for creating and implementing strategies and innovative processes in support of BP's commitment to include certified minority, women, veteran, LGBTQ-owned businesses in their procurement process. Under Debra's leadership, BP has received numerous awards and recognition for their supplier initiatives, too many to go over right now, and I attribute, and I know many in this audience attribute that success to Debra and her wonderful team. Debra is the chair of the board of the Women's Business Development Center, and she's also vice chair of the board of the Women's Business Enterprise National Council. I have had the pleasure of working with Debra for many years, 14 to be exact, Debra, and can tell you that she is passionate and committed to the WBDC's mission to support and accelerate the business development and growth of women-owned businesses. Please join me in giving Debra a warm welcome.
Thank you, Amelia. Well, this is really the fun part of the day, not that we all haven't had a good time all morning, but it is my pleasure to join my colleagues in having this discussion about supplier diversity and the trends. We know that with every subject and with every function, you have to stay relevant. And it is today's conversation that will help all of us kind of refresh what we're doing and stay relevant as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to ask the panelists to please join me on stage. I am going to, by name, introduce them. Their bios are in the book that you have. And they're going to talk a little bit about themselves as well. So Regina Heyward is our first panelist with Wells Fargo. She's the Senior Vice President and Head of Supplier Diversity. Regina Newcomb, we got two Reginas, that's very unusual. Regina Newcomb is the Supplier Diversity and Program Director at Northwestern Mutual. And Kathy April Rush is the leader of North America's Supplier Diversity for AbbVie. AbbVie. I knew I was going to mess that up. Linda Sutton, sitting next to her, one of our great entrepreneurs, is founder and CEO of Kairos Consulting Worldwide. And we do believe in diversity, so we have Emmett Vaughn. Emmett Vaughn, the director of the Office of Diverse Business Empowerment for Exelon Corporation, that is now a billion-dollar roundtable corporation. Yay.
Oh, yeah.
Michelle Vondrasek. I get it. Vondrasek, founder and president of Von Technologies, LLC. My practice was better than my online. Okay. What I'm going to do, now that you've all been introduced, I'm going to ask you to talk to us a little bit about yourselves and your company and what you do in your role. And I'm going to start with Regina.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for WBDC and inviting Wells Fargo to be a part of this great conference. When I think about my role within Wells Fargo, I consider myself to be an influencer, as well as a very passionate advocate for the relationships that Wells Fargo builds with diversity businesses. We have reached $1.1 billion of diverse spend, and we have done it very intentionally by partnering closely with women-owned businesses and other diverse represented businesses to fulfill obligations across our supply chain organization. So I spend a lot of my time working with my team. I have a great team that's in Charlotte, Des Moines, Iowa, and San Francisco, California. And again, we are very thankful to be here today.
Good, thank you. Regina?
Yes, so Regina Newcomb, Northwestern Mutual. We're actually headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've spent the better part of my career working in supply chain management. So I spent a lot of years doing contracts and negotiations, and was fortunate enough to have an opportunity when I joined Northwestern Mutual 4 years ago to take on a new challenge, which was creating a supplier diversity program at the company, which hadn't existed before. So we're relatively new compared to some of our counterparts in this space of supplier diversity. So I view this panel opportunity as really wonderful for me to learn more as well about what other corporations have been doing in this space. Northwestern Mutual as a company, we have 160 years in providing financial security to our clients. And as we think about supplier diversity as a company, it really does resonate with who we're trying to be to our clients. small business owners, diverse business owners. Those are our markets. Those are the people that we want to work with, and we want them to work with us as well.
Great, thank you. Kathy.
Good afternoon, Kathy April Rush. I head supplier diversity for AbbVie. Our program is North America in its scope. I've been in supplier diversity for 12 years, and I've built the supplier diversity initiative at AbbVie from ground zero when we separated from our legacy company in 2013. We manufacture a variety of drug therapies. We manufacture the #1 drug in the world, which is Humira, which has about 10 plus indications. What I do in my role is everything soup to nuts supplier diversity. So it's policy, it's communication, it's strategy, it's integration with our category management team, it's sourcing, it's influencing, it's selling, it's marketing, it's everything related to getting the diverse supplier in the door.
Okay, thank you. Lynn.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Lynn Sutton, and I am the owner and managing principal of Kairos Worldwide. We are a small business today, a consulting firm that does process reengineering largely. And what that means is we help transition or redesign the way organizations work today. And some of that is sparked by changes in technology, and sometimes it's just the need or the desire to work more efficiently and more effectively. And we help organizations redesign what that looks like for their teams, and then help those teams actually adjust and adopt those new procedures. If I consider what my role is, I'd say my role has changed over the course of the growth of the business. We've been in business for 13 years now, and in the first 4 years, my role was largely a consultant. As I started this out, and it was just me. And as the organization grew, that shifted. In the second 4 years, I'd say from about 2008 to 2012, we went from working for mid-sized to large corporations to doing a lot of work in federal. And so my work there, my role there really shifted to more of managing and building those federal relationships and understanding how to set the right vision for a company working under those highly regulated agencies. And then in these last 4 to 5 years, we've spent a lot more time working in private corporations with utilities, in the healthcare industry, and financial services. And my role has shifted again to being that more in business development, but more partnering with a lot of small and mid-sized firms and some larger firms. So we'll hear more about that later. But it's been a growing process.
Thank you, thank you. Emmett.
Debra, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Special thanks to Amelia and her staff for inviting me here. I'm loving the photographers because you guys need to understand. I've had dreams that look like this. So I hope I haven't arrived at the other end of those dreams too soon. I do represent Exelon Corporation. We are the proud parent company of ComEd. But we are also, a lot of people don't know about Exelon. They confuse us with the other company with 3 syllables in it. And Exelon Corporation, we are the largest generator of electricity, primarily through carbon neutral or nuclear power. We are also the largest utility holding company in the United States. So in addition to being ComEd here in Chicago, we're also, if you will, ComEd of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and most of eastern Pennsylvania. We're ComEd of Washington, D.C., the state of Delaware, Atlantic City and everything south of New Jersey, as well as Baltimore, Maryland. So we cover a lot of ground. Debra mentioned in the introduction that we are the most recent inductee into the $1 Billion Roundtable, and many of you sitting in the room have been a big part of helping us achieve that journey, so I offer my thanks to you. It's interesting that, as most people have heard of the $1 Billion Roundtable, that only 26 companies preceded us in getting to the BDR, so that says an awful lot. This year, good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, we're going to hit $2.4 billion in spending with diversity certified suppliers.
Okay. Let's keep going, Michelle.
Vondrasek. Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Vondrasek. I am the founder of Von Technologies. This is our 10-year anniversary, and to describe what we do, I guess I'll ask you guys a question. I already know everybody has a mobile device. How many people have 2 mobile devices? How many have 3? Maybe a watch, a phone, a pad.
Oh, yeah.
So we design and deploy wireless infrastructure so you guys can get your streaming, your emails, your text messages. We do this for small, medium, and large corporations. And after we build these Wi-Fi networks, we stick around, we manage them, and we provide analytics about the guests that show up in your venue who connect to your Wi-Fi. We do this on a national basis. We do this direct for large corporations, carriers, VARs, OEMs, and we do it for companies directly who are trying to, if you have not updated your Wi-Fi in the last 2 to 3 years, it's probably not adequate. It probably can't hold the demand that all you 3 devices are putting on it. My role in the company in the past 10 years, obviously the first few years, sales. Sales, sales, sales. I think you're always a salesperson no matter how many years you're in business. Since we've grown, it's really been understanding where technology is going, where we need to go and grow and keep our focus. We can't be everything to everybody, but what are the gaps in the marketplace that we can focus our services on to fulfill?
Great. So as we start the conversation, we're talking about trends, and as you heard, there's multiple industries represented here. There will be some things that are fairly consistent as we talk about procurement, and some that are very different. And there's no accident that we have supplier diversity professionals here, because in most cases, we are the first person you meet and the person that can navigate you through the organization. So as you heard, we have to know a little bit about everything and have to be able to influence and take your message to the right places so that you have an opportunity to then sell yourselves. So with that, I'm going to ask for the panelists to talk about how or why are the trends different now from previous years, and what you think is driving the change. And I'm going to start, actually everybody's going to answer the question. I'll start with you, Regina.
Absolutely. When we talk about trends, I think it's very important to think in terms of the demographic shifts that are happening in the United States. Since 1997, there's been a 74% increase in the number of women-owned businesses that have started. So the sheer numbers of WBE-owned organizations is growing. For an organization like Wells Fargo, we're 95% concentrated in the domestic United States, so our customer base is here in the U.S. When we see demographics like that, we know that there are opportunities not only for us to understand the ideas, the innovation, the competitiveness of that growing demographic group of businesses, but it's also an opportunity for us to play a role in cultivating and developing the types of businesses that we need within our organization. So one of the things that we have done since 2014 is actively focused on growing our spend with women-owned businesses. And when we look at the numbers, we're sitting at about $363 million today with WBEs, and that has steadily increased since 2014 because we've gotten into conversations with each one of our line of business heads, from our wealth and investment management group to our community bank to our wholesale banking institution to our payments and virtual solutions teams. We're in there having conversations with them as they're going through their annual strategic planning about what areas do they believe they will need to engage third parties. And within that engagement plan for third parties, how can we incorporate women-owned businesses? We actively search the market through organizations like WeBank and WBDC and WPO and others to say, here's exactly what Wells Fargo needs, not just for today, but for the next 5 to 10 years. And oh, by the way, if we don't see businesses in the marketplace that are at scale today, then we will invest in either direct development, we call it high potential direct supplier development, or in certain cases, we will send groups or cohorts of women-owned businesses through programs like Tuck or programs like Stanford to refine out their business acumen and their strategic skill set. It's that important to us, and we believe it's that vital to not only our businesses' long-term success, but it's that vital to our supply chain competitiveness. So when you think about this, and you think about an organization, 270 billion team members, 95% US-based, over 250 billion in market cap, we are looking for that thing that sets our companies apart, and that has to flow down to the organizations that we bring through our supply chain. So it's a very serious time for us, and I think it's really about business strategy, it's about competitive advantage, and it's about how do we now form the right relationships with this growing group of businesses so that from a long-term perspective, Wells Fargo can continue to be very competitive.
Thank you, thank you. But
all right,
Regina,
I got some.
Regina, any comments from you on that?
Oh boy, that's a tough one to follow. You know, obviously we're a lot smaller of a company. We are very focused in the Midwest region from a sourcing and procurement standpoint. But in terms of trends and what I see, having been in the supply chain industry for 15 plus years, is that the pace of business right now is just so accelerated. And speaking more broadly for the city of Milwaukee, which isn't, I know we're considered northern Chicago suburbs by some, but I mean, if you think about that, it's really not that far from Chicago, and Milwaukee has a very big push right now to become a tech hub of the Midwest. And so everything that the city's doing, everything that Northwestern Mutual is engaged and involved in is really focused on the speed of business and the agility around that. And so I would just say from a trends perspective, it's more critical now than ever that you're competing with, from a customer standpoint or a customer experience standpoint, you're competing with the Amazons and the Googles and these companies. And so those are the types of changes in the quickness of business that companies like Northwestern Mutual, who are really focused now on the digital experience of our clients, and to Regina's point earlier about the changing demographics, not just women, but if you think about the next biggest customer base coming up is the millennial age. And I mean, you can't tell me that they don't do everything on their phones and on their mobile devices. So I would say that's really a trend that we're seeing, is just trying to help our supply base and our diverse suppliers in particular navigate that change in pace of business.
Okay. Kathy, anything different in the pharmaceutical industry?
Yeah, I have a very biopharmaceutical response to that in terms of trends we're seeing and why we're seeing them. The number one is safety of our supply chain, because we don't negotiate with people's lives. There's no exception. The work that we do ultimately ends up in some sort of drug therapy that your sister, your mother, your brother, your uncle take, and maybe even you take. And so the safety of our supply chain is crucial. And over the years, you've heard it, because when there is a breach or something goes wrong in a supply chain, it makes the front page. So that is very crucial to us, and we go to all costs to protect our supply chain. The second thing is cost pressure. And there is a lot of cost pressure, and essentially saving dollars in terms of our procurement activity and what we're buying means the more that we can invest in R&D. And the more that we can invest in R&D, the more robust our pipeline is. So that is very crucial. Cost pressure, cost. You cannot avoid this conversation, and rightfully so. And thirdly is SRM, is supplier relationship management. I mean, the way that we manage suppliers today is very different. If some of you have been at this for a long time, and you have experienced that it is maybe tougher for you to penetrate or spend time with the procurement folks. There probably is a reason for that. But SRM is everything from our preferred supplier networks, how we evaluate your risk. We don't wait for you to tell us that there's a risk in doing business with you. Trust me, we are researching you ourselves. And so everything having to do with that, the contract terms and conditions, preferred supplier network I mentioned, supplier risk, all of that is very important. So the way in which we deal with suppliers is very different because we cannot allow, circling back to number one, we have to ensure that we have the safest supply chain possible for the work that we do.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to skip and go to Emmett, and Lynn, I'm going to come back and ask you to give us some examples that I know you can talk about. Okay. So will you talk, Emmett?
Sure. This is, people have to put in perspective, this is really the 5th decade of what we call supplier diversity. So I have a bit of maybe a bittersweet answer because as a person who's on the receiving end of a lot of what you guys are bringing to the table, I'm not so sure that the train hasn't left the station when it comes to supplier diversity, and it is a fast-moving train. And the trend that I'm hoping to see, Debra, is one where never being afraid to be that guy that says that thing. I think diversity certified suppliers have got a lot of catching up to do. I think we are, the most interesting trend that I would see is what was a part of the old playbook is now, I think, ever increasingly become a part of what's required in the new playbook, and that's the term strategic alliances. We are not solving the capitalization equation for small businesses nearly fast enough, and yet the companies, whether the companies like you see up here today, we're moving at a speed like I've never witnessed before in a career that spans at least a couple of those decades I was talking about of the 5 that are supplier diversity. So it's important that the revisitation in the catch-up that I say to you that are entrepreneurs, not only are strategic alliances critical, I think what I would call new age strategic alliances, and I'm glad to see my friend and colleague here, Sheila Morgan from the Chicago Minority Supply Development Council. From our standpoint with diversity challenges, with increasing legislative and regulatory challenges, and then especially in the cities that we serve, you heard me mention them, you get the code, Philadelphia, Chicago, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., you know where I'm coming from. That those of you that are not only bringing strategic alliances to the table, but bringing multi-ethnic and different dimensions to your business development game are absolutely going to be requisite to cracking the code and keeping pace with a large we're a US-based corporation, and what we do is across those states, but when you're talking about national scope and scale, and when you're talking about a prospective customer for you that is addressing, let's call them what they are. If you didn't get the code, it's called urban markets. Our ratepayers are people that live in cities that are easily a part of what can be described as the Browning of America. And the diversity certification going forward, as a singular diversity certification, won't cut it. We need solutions that bring us your fine products and services, but bring us with the same type of strategic emphasis that we have in keeping the lights on in all those cities.
Very good. And Lynn, can you speak a little bit to examples of what you've seen in terms of trends from your perspective as a WBE? Absolutely, and I think it's a great, what Emmett just said is a great segue, because it's the silver lining between that the train has left the station scenario, and that is that, first and foremost, let me just tell you, for those who are business owners out there, we are small, we are fast, we are strong, and we can run and catch up. Okay? Right. And the good news, to Emmett's point and to some of the other the points that were said earlier, with the data that's out there, the good news is that now that data is being used, it's being parsed, sliced and diced with much more
accuracy and much more real-time usage. And businesses and their clients and the regulators are able to see in real time, here's where you are, here's where your spend is, we'd like to see this, we'd like to see more of that. And companies, many of the clients on this stage are able to act and respond much more quickly because they have that information in hand. And that means that there is a greater need, and that presents the opportunity for those of us, our small businesses. And to Emmett's point, the strategic alliances, that it is key for us, and the opportunity for us is to partner and look to each other to see who's already playing in that space and how can I add my little piece to that. And with the diversity that I bring, be it women-owned, be it an ethnicity, ethnic diversity, what additional element can I add that will benefit the client and give me the experience that I need going as tier 2? And that's what that is. If you're working alongside somebody who's already a supplier and you're adding a piece, that tier 2 experience is invaluable and can really help grow your business. And the time is ripe for that, especially with the changes in the regulations. And again, the demands from the consumers that are looking to many of these large corporations saying, how are you spending? How are you spending your dollars? Where are you spending your dollars? And really creating a new level of pressure that was not there 20 or 30 years ago.
Okay. Regina, did you say you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on something, Lynn, that you're saying, and I kind of want to put this out here in this conversation. I think it's time for corporate America to stop small shaming. And I just made that term up. And what I mean by stop small shaming is I have seen some small businesses come into Wells Fargo and rock it against some pretty major large corporations. Don't think that you can't compete. Some of those large organizations started in garages, right? Started in people's basements, and they wouldn't be where they are today had they not had the opportunity to take the risk, to meet the right stakeholders, to put that RFP in, to compete, and to compete again until they won the business. So I just want to say, to Lynn's point, figure out how you need to approach corporate America, but don't be afraid of the big guys, because you have just as much know-how, just as great ideas, and just as much ability to win that RFP and to win that business as any big company. So we got to stop small shaming, is what I want to say.
Well, thank you for that motivating comment.
Absolutely.
What we were hearing that was really consistent is safety. Safety's first. And I know in the environment where I live, it is the number one thing. Price, nothing else is going to get above safety. Strategic. We are being more strategic. You see procurement organizations, it's beyond procurement actually, in terms of it's a strategy, and we're being very strategic in who we bring to the table. Targeted, we're taking targeted approaches. Where are there gaps in our organization? And then we're going out looking for companies in those gap areas, even to the point of development, as Regina mentioned, if you were providing scholarships and things like that for development. I think, Emmett, the strategic alliances, at one time, we did not push those. It was very, very hard. Now it's a way of doing business, because even the big guys are creating those strategic alliances to get the big contract. And I have to mention something related to the DOT that we talked about at lunch, and that this is a DOT, and it's about the relationships, because you can't get to any of those points around safety, strategy, or anything without building relationships, and it takes time. So with that, I'm going to do two things. One, the way I build relationships is I am out and about a lot, and they talked about what I do with WBDC. That's important to me because I get to meet all of you multiple times, and so that helps with the relationship building. I want to introduce Yvette Moulton, who's in the back of the room from my team. That is the other way I get a chance to do these things, is that we have teams that kind of help us keep it moving so that you can build relationships with us. And so what I want to ask of the panel is, what are your recommendations for building long-term relationships with small and diverse companies? I mean, the other thing is about sustainability. We have companies in our supply chain, and we want to make sure you stay in. So how does that come about? So can you guys speak to building the relationships, the sustainability, and what a good supplier relationship looks like to you? And I'm going to start with Kathy this time to talk a bit about that.
I think part of it is establishing your brand. And I think the big takeaway that everybody's going to be talking about today is the dots in the straight line, right? Because I do agree with you, Debra, about these respective dots, and you're planning them. And at some point, they are going to do this, and you're going to have a continuum. But I think if you present yourself in such a way, you establish a brand, your first your first introduction, making sure that you stay authentic and true to that. I have found, and most times a lot of learning comes from mistakes. And I'm, when suppliers are on the wrong path, I'm also a course corrector, because I'm trying to help them when I see them making a mistake getting in. So one of the things that I find out once people get over into an RFI, RFP stage that doesn't help to build confidence and this sort of long-term trust is asking for exceptions. That is like the faux pas. Asking for the exception to the RFI, the exception to the RFP, the date, the so forth and so forth, and so on. And when you think that if you cannot do it solo, it goes back to this whole strategic alliance thing. Maybe it ought to be a joint venture. It maybe ought to be strategic alliance, or something that can help you and can strengthen your value prop for the corporation that you're going after the business for. The other thing is transparency, making sure that you're providing, that you have open lines of communication. Again, the amount of effort and resources that are dedicated to managing suppliers today is unprecedented. So if there's information that you think that we might find out, that you probably should tell us first, you should beat us to getting that information in any other way. So transparency, I think, is really key to building that. And I think what success really looks like is more a partner than it is a transactional supplier relationship. We're looking for partners. So if you can bring to us your innovative ideas, your sustainable ideas, all of that is really important. Perhaps perhaps we started with you and you sell glow-in-the-dark widgets, and that's what we need. But maybe we need glow-in-the-dark widgets that can float, and you've never been asked the question before. And, it sounds trite, but, bringing that information. So that's what I mean about partnering. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that suppliers don't do is they don't ask about our pain points. So oftentimes, again, talking about building trust and how you build a relationship, to attempt to sell something to a corporation that we don't need to buy doesn't help you, trying to retrofit something that we don't need. But turning that around and asking about our pain points, now we think, okay, you're listening, because here is our pain point, and nobody's asked us that before. And if you have something that can help us with that, then we want to talk, and we want to continue to talk.
Great. Regina?
Yeah, so to kind of add on to that, Kathy, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll sit down with a potential or prospective supplier who doesn't know what we do as a company. And that's really challenging for us, and it becomes challenging for them as well. Now, situationally, if you're doing sort of a matchmaking and you don't know who you're meeting with in advance, that's fine. But I think you should walk into it with the expectation of learning about what that company does, that to figure out more about what their needs might be, to your point about, what are those pain points. I think that's probably one of the biggest things you can do to make sure you're making effective use of your time. The other thing, too, is that, and we've been fortunate at Northwestern Mutual that we've had the opportunity to do some RFPs more recently, that I was able to bring in some of the diverse suppliers that I'd met through these types of events, and given them that chance to compete in those processes. And so I would say that no matter where you're at in your business, make sure you have a connection with that supplier diversity representative, because You know, and perhaps my counterparts here have a different structure because of the maturity of their programs. But right now, you know, for Northwestern Mutual, we have a handful of buyers who really get it. They buy into supplier diversity and the value and importance of it. But the reality is for us, because our program is newer, I'm kind of the point person, and so if you don't have a relationship with me, I'm not going to know who to direct you to. But I would just say make sure that you're leveraging that and make sure you're building that relationship and looking to them to kind of be your conduit within the business. And I say that because I know a lot of you are phoning up and trying to get a hold of the buyer or the decision makers, and that's great that you have that contact, but you also need to have channels within that organization to help support you as well.
Okay. Emmett, any comment from you?
Yeah, just a couple quick ones. I think that, again, maybe staying along that theme of relationships, and I'll add another word to it, relationship capital is becoming increasingly important. And the point that was made about understanding the pain point, I think Kathy made that point. I think it's important, the more complex industries get, you really have got to adopt the culture and become a part of that industry. There's any number of ways to do this. I mean, you can, you know, there's all kind of trade journals, there's trade associations that you're going to cross over into some of the very people that you're prospecting that you should probably be a part of if you're going to really service the industry. Then again, I get back to just the simple, innovative concept of pain point. In a regulated industry, in one that, again, our bandwidth across so many different cities is with rate payers. So our customers, in most cases, don't have a choice, very honestly. So we have to be particularly sensitive to price management and cost management. One example, it's in a room full of geniuses, an ultimate genius is a woman who most of you know, Loretta Rosenmeyer, with the country Intren. Intren is as diversity certified as you can get, a woman-owned business, yet Loretta probably, hopefully Loretta not putting your business in the wind, it's Loretta subcontracts about 30% of her business that she does with ComEd and with Exelon with intentionality, watch this, not to other WBEs, but to MBEs, because it satisfies a pain point of us as a key customer, knowing, and it's kind of maybe the point that Regina was making about small shaming, ours is a tough business to get into without scale. And without it making it dramatic in our business, you mess up, you don't get fired, you mess up, most of the time you die. I mean, that's the reality of fooling around with high voltage, you know, and things along those lines where it's not to say that's the entirety of what we do. But the point is that it's a different look at coming to the marketplace with solutions because you understand our DNA or our pulse, as opposed to just bringing us, we're the best at, or we're the only, or the sheer energy you bring behind your product or your service just won't really do it.
Okay. Michelle, I'm going to ask you to give some of your experience.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more with Emmett. Me too, $1 less. That is a day of the past. You really do need to understand who your customers are and what is disrupting their industry. And how can you go in there, and when you talk about pain points, you can find out retail, e-commerce, pain point, hurting them. What's going to help them? Almost any industry, hospitality, B&Bs, pain point, what's going to help them? These are things that if we have a product, we need to understand what are those gaps, what are those pain points, and be very specific on how we can handle that, how we can support that. We talk about Tier 2. I built my company on Tier 2. I'm very proud of that. Wow. I went after big deals, large sales cycle, high risk. They weren't going to come to me direct, but I got that relationship with other companies, and I came in, I stayed in my core, I stayed in my lane, I augmented the fringe that I couldn't do, and I was able to bring a full totality solution. That's what they're looking for. And as smaller companies, we are nimble. We can move quicker, like Lynn said. We're quicker to change on the dime. We're innovative. We bring a lot of different opinions and perspectives that sometimes big corporations don't get to see to the table, and that inspires innovation. And they truly do look for that. Even though there is a threshold of how big you need to be to work with them, if you come in with the right solution, with a good partnership to be able to fulfill those gaps, I don't know any company out there that wouldn't consider it.
Wonderful. And Regina, did you have any comments on this one?
You know what, I'll just add an example. I don't know if Viva is in the house. I saw them when I came in.
Viva was here
Give me a
earlier.
wave and a stand up right there, Viva. I just want to give a real life example. Let's shout out the Viva team back here. Because what I'll say about relationships is team oriented. I agree with the comment that teams and relationships with corporations really boil down to people. Make sure that you are highlighting the people on your team and don't sell yourself short as far as the power of your team. If you have someone on your team who is excellent at communication or excellent at understanding the technology components of your offering, or if you have a board of advisors that maybe is not on your full-time roster of employees, but these are people who you can tap into to extend your network and extend the expertise that's coming into your deal offering. Make sure you let your clients know that, because what I'm finding is today the differentiator is in relationships is really the people that you have access to and the people that you can bring into those deals. Along with that, I agree with what I'm hearing about knowing the organization, but it's more than just reading the publicly available information on the organization. Supplier diversity teams can help to get you in front of decision makers who will have real open and frank conversations with you about what solutions they're looking for, about what pressure they're getting from their boss, right? About what their performance expectations look like for the next year. And that's how those wheels start to turn as to, here's how I can help you be successful. And sometimes it's as simple as finding that person in corporate America who's really struggling with something and they need to be successful. Lastly, I just want to say on this one, I want to shout out Jared Sheets, who's sitting here in the front row, part of our supplier diversity team. Just really thankful for the resources that we've put behind supplier diversity so that we can get out in the marketplace and meet suppliers that come into the organization. But I agree, relationships are critical.
They're critical. And go ahead, Kathy.
I just had a comment.
Okay.
Yes, about
And the same relationship question?
yeah, but on the opposite side.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention about how those relationships can be eroded and how they can go wrong. And I have two examples, very, very briefly. The first example is that when the supplier is given advice that they don't take. That's the number one thing. So you talk about how can you build, confidence and trust with decision makers. We give you advice and you don't take it. That's number one. The other thing is because it's so pressing on my mind, and it's an issue that Georgia and the team have been trying to help me with, but we've had a long-standing WBE, very fruitful relationship, very lucrative relationship for the WBE. The WBE decides to change their management structure and their management organization and to go to something other than a WBE and doesn't notify us. So we are taking, it is an adverse impact to our supplier diversity spend, our goals. The supplier, we didn't think enough that this was significant or important enough to tell us. So there was not a partnering. So there was nothing that we could do to plan or prep or brace for this particular issue. And so that, there are numerous people involved with this, but I can't tell you what that has done to erode that partnership that we thought was more open, active communication, and it was not, and it's an adverse impact.
Yeah, and that last one is another whole panel discussion.
Full panel discussion.
We'll get to that one. But what I was hearing is there's a lot of information out there, so what I think is really detrimental as well is when you don't do your homework, because we all know there's a lot of public information out there that's really easy to get to, and we all know that we're very open to setting up some get-to-know-you sessions. And I like that phrase because I don't want you coming in thinking that you're going to walk out with information on the next RFQ. It's really just to get to know the organization, get to know how we buy what it is you sell. And then the other piece that I have to highlight, and Kathy brought it up early, was asking questions. Sometimes we don't hear enough questions, and we may not have the answer, but we can go back and get it for you. But if you don't ask it, then somehow you're put in the wrong path, right, to build a relationship that you want to build. So that brings me to supplier reliability and risk management, which are usually top of mind with decision makers for many of the major corporations. And sometimes we view them as being obstacles to some of our diverse firms getting contracts. Now, we've already highlighted that safety is really, really key to us, but I'd like the panel to talk about what should our diverse businesses be doing to build that confidence. So we, a little bit of it is relationship, but what are some of the other things that the WBE could do to build a confidence with the decision maker that helps them manage what they consider their risk tolerance for whatever they're doing. So I'm going to start with Kathy on this one. You're looking a little, is that okay?
No, yeah,
all
that's
right.
fine, that's fine. I was thinking, meeting the criteria, meeting the, if you don't know whether or not you're scorecarded or you're segmented, you need to ask the question if nobody has offered it up. But in terms of, what you can do, be reliable, be on time. Don't have us have to sort of chase you for information or, where's the delivery or anything like that, because that is so critical to your reputation. And once the reputation is sort of tarnished internally, it's really hard to get it back. But we do scorecard suppliers, and we do look at metrics. And so we're looking to make sure that you're meeting all of the metrics. One of the most common ones is if you're an HR or staff aug type supplier, right? There's a scorecard, and I hate to tell new suppliers this all the time. I say, you guys are in line and you're waiting for somebody to mess up, because until somebody messes up, we're not going to bring a new supplier in, and they're doing everything they can to stay in. So making sure that if the company has a measurement, a KPI, scorecard, whatever it is, that you're meeting that. And if you don't know that's how you're being evaluated, you need to know, because you need to know what the rules are so that you can do that. And over-deliver. I'm not going to say under-promise and over-deliver. Forget the under-promise part. Just over-deliver. Because, what the T's and C's of the contract, that's what we expect. When you go up and above and beyond that, then that's a little icing on the cake. We don't expect that. That's great. And so, that gives you the, gold star.
Good. Lynn, any examples from a WBE perspective on building that confidence with the decision maker?
Yes. I would say your best example, or the best way to build confidence with a new client, is to reference an old client that you have worked well with. And I think I'll share two stories. The first is 2008. For us, we were 4 years old. So I say we at the time. My company was 4 years old, and it was just me. And we won our first federal contract, and it was with the U.S. Navy. And it was a huge contract. It was a worldwide implementation that we were helping them with. And I was partnering with another firm, another WBE firm, that had experience working with federal, but I did not. And I was following along, trying to learn very quickly to stay on top of, from a contract perspective, what needed to be done. But there were several things from a management perspective that were not being done well. And about 9 months or a year into this 2-year effort, the Navy program manager reached over and said, I'm not really sure, comfortable, who's leading this? And he just voiced some concerns about how things were going. It was then my responsibility as the owner and the prime on this large contract to really step up and grow up very quickly. And to be completely open and honest about, and listen first intently to understand what was missing in that, and then respond very quickly. And be very clear about, here's what we're doing to get this right, here's what we're doing to make sure that he understood who was leading that effort, and what we were now going to do differently. And because our response was timely, because it was very transparent, because it was really quick, that turned very immediately. So from a past performance standpoint, and they grade us annually on that contract. And so we went from a satisfactory grade in the first year to an exceeds expectation in every mark in that second year. And he has said in that final write-up and in every request that we've asked him for, as we asked for references, he has really applauded our management style in coming in as a newbie, but being able to really step it up. And that then gave us a great reference point, as well as a great model to use as we went back over into corporate. Because now we understood it's okay to come in and not know a few things. You will not know a lot, and you should expect that there will be a lot of mistakes to be made. But be very clear about it, learn quickly, don't be afraid to say it out loud, and as you are correcting, communicate that. Here's what we're doing. Ask questions. Is this okay? Is this meeting standard? Because that's the only way you're going to get better. And it's no point in pretending that you're going to come in and be perfect, but certainly come in and be responsive and communicate.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, Emmett, and then we're going to run into some of your Q&A, but there are a couple of points I do want to get out. One, I want to let Emmett comment on this. I want to go to Tier 2 with you, and Michelle, I want to come back to you on Tier 2 from your perspective, because you made a comment that you had built your business that way. So we're going to get those points out, and then we'll progress into our Q&A. So Emmett?
Debra, thank you. Just keep in mind this, the addendum is your friend. And when I say the addendum is your friend, first and foremost, always make sure you're clear, you're concise, you are answering everything on the RFP. That's the given. But when I say the addendum is your friend, and this goes back to that digging into the DNA of your prospective client, tell us, and several people have mentioned it, tell us about your good relationships. First of all, in the industry in which I work in, whether it's utilities or industry, we all know each other. So if you tell us that you did something good with Joan Kerr out at Pacific Gas and Electric, or that you've got a national scope of delivery, that's going to resonate. We might not ask that in the RFP. And it seems almost painfully obvious sitting in this type of a forum. Don't hesitate to tell us what Amelia or Sheila would say about you. That's one of the great tiebreakers. I'll tell people in a heartbeat. Some of you have heard this little speech from me before. If you're not the best in class in your category, in your certifying body, you really got a lot of nerve trying to talk to us about something. I mean, if you're not serving on committees and helping do some additional things, additional work for the guys that are banging us for more resources, if you are that resource, that's helpful to know. I'll guarantee you that's as simple as that sounds, that's a great differentiator when you want to draw attention in a day and age when there's so many people that have become diversity certified.
Mm-hmm. Emmett, while you have the mic here, can you talk a little bit about the IUBDC?
Yes.
So, and that's specific to your industry.
Yeah, the Illinois Business Utility Diversity Council is the brainchild of the current set of public service commissioners of the Illinois Commerce Commission. when we talk about this, and we've got at least 2 regulated industries with one bank and a utility up here. Bottom line is consumer interest is where the ICC, they hang their hats on making sure that we're doing more. So a couple years ago, they decided to form a unified council among all the regulated utilities in the state of Illinois with really one chartered goal, to make sure that the utilities, because of the position of almost really being monopolies, that the ICC was going to take a very focused interest on making sure that in cases where they are approving rates constantly, which is tantamount to us being profitable or not, that we were appropriately reinvesting in economic development and appropriately reinvesting in community and economic contribution. That's not just unique to Illinois. I mean, California could probably lay claim to starting it with any state that has heavily regulated industries. There's several that have them. So that's probably, the best thing. I would say that we've made great progress in the past couple years of finding nirvana among the 7 regulated utilities in terms of best practice sharing and trying to create more open opportunities and engagement, in some cases joint. There's some of you sitting in the audience, as I look at some of the familiar faces, that have clearly benefited from the IUBDC's efforts, where you may have been doing business with one utility and maybe you're doing business with 4 now. So that's the goal. We continue to work. I will say that ComEd is considered among the leaders in this effort, so we're kind of like old big brother. ComEd's big brother. I'm just old, but but that's probably a good way to put that.
Good. Thank you for that. I'm sure that will be helpful to a lot of the audience.
I'll just say on the IUBDC, they are doing an absolutely fantastic job with not only sharing the best practices with each other, but also connecting those suppliers and would-be suppliers.
Right, which fits into the whole relationship conversation, because we all know each other, and when we band together as industry, it's helpful to you, because if you're doing a good job with one of us, we assume may not be the right word, but there's a good chance that you can do business with everyone in that industry class. Okay, I want to move quickly to Tier 2, because I think it's so important, because when we talk about trends and being very targeted and very strategic, that means that the supply base is shrinking, right? So Tier 2 is our friend. And Regina, can you talk some more about that?
Yeah, and what I'm really seeing is as the emergence of Tier 2 and supplier diversity does connect very heavily to the risk conversation that we were just having. In fact, there are some statistics that show that supplier diversity spend, that total number that you hear from companies, can be as much as 30 to 50% of that spend that's reported. What we do with Tier 2 is we negotiate with our prime suppliers to say, we want you to bring in as subcontractors certified diversity businesses that will compose 10, 20, 30% of this deal, depending on what the internal thresholds are by category for actual outsourcing. So in some categories it is capped. What that allows us to do is to leverage our prime suppliers for the governance and the oversight of that sub-supply base. And it does alleviate a bit of risk off of the deal from the direct buying client. Now, not all of the risk, because as we're talking about here, financial services is very heavily regulated, so we can't use second tier or use that structuring to say, oh, we're now not accountable. We are still fully accountable for the deal. But what it does allow us to do in those spaces where we see there's an immature, diverse supply base, that supply base is really ramping up, it allows us to have those subcontractors work directly with the seasoned business to grow and to scale. Now, what's the ultimate goal of Tier 2? In my mind, if I start seeing Tier 2 reporting that's looking like 30 and 40 and 50% of a deal, I'm asking the question to our sourcing team, why aren't they going head to head, right? We now have a diversity supplier who's at scale and who should know us enough to be able to to do business directly with Wells Fargo. And oh, by the way, sometimes the way this happens from an industry perspective, especially if you have an industry that may be on the decline, some of those prime suppliers may have moved on to something else. They're focusing on another core within their business, and that's a great sweet spot for us to then step in and say, well, we have another supply base here that can continue to offer these services. Just a few categories where I've seen Tier 2 work excellently. IT and technology. Most of your big technology providers now have diverse supply-based capabilities. They call them preferred supplier programs and VAR programs, so that's pretty interesting. Construction. We go to the second and third tier at times on construction deals. We're bringing in minority elevator companies, woman-owned roofing companies, Native American carpeting companies that are working with our general contractors on some of our pretty significant bills. Even in areas like professional services, it used to be an untapped space in categories like legal and consulting, where that was kind of the don't touch that business. But what we're doing now is we're pushing even Tier 2 into those relationships, and we're saying to some of our large consultants, we want you to bring in a pool of diversity businesses, whether they're women-owned businesses or LGBT or others, to help support the deal. And I think what we find overall is that the deal delivery, the actual product or the solution that's coming back to Wells Fargo time after time is pretty superb, and it allows us to celebrate some of our corporate values within that deal structure. So we've talked about diversity and inclusion, we've talked about supplier diversity, and those things are really celebrated within our organization, even at a deal level, when we're able to say, look at this $100 million deal and look at the way that it impacted our communities, both from a diversity, a regional, and an access to Wells Fargo standpoint.
Okay, and so Michelle, bring us home with your experience in Tier 2.
Absolutely. Proud to be a Tier 2 company. It gets back to the risk. I'm in a high-risk area. I am touching the backbone of an organization infrastructure, how they communicate. I knew right out of the gate that I wasn't going to be able to knock on the big corporations' doors and then pay attention to me. I want to give a shout out to AT&T. They were our first customer. They kind of kept us in the forefront of technology and helped us evolve and get experts at what we do. And they often brought us in for small pieces of a project. And then they got bigger. And then they got bigger. And then before we knew it, we were doing from cradle to grave solutions for them. As Regina said, that got recognized by some of their customers. And as they went in different directions, I still stayed to fulfill that gap for that customer. It's a great stepping stone. It helps them to manage risk. They have a threshold. You have to be a certain size, around a certain amount of time, a certain amount of successes for somebody to take a chance on you. And when you're in some of the industries that you described, it's very high risk, especially consulting services. There's nothing tangible. You have to wait till it's done, till they're finished to see if it worked, if it was successful. That's a big swallow for large corporations. But if you can partner with other prime companies, and that's my first question always. I am a prime to so-and-so. I know they are your prime. How do we work together? And it has been incredibly successful. I have never gone in there trying to go direct from day one. How do I fit into your supply chain with your current primes? Where are the gaps that they are struggling with that I can plug myself in? And then I expand my market share. As I get more comfortable and they are more comfortable with me, as I'm better in their industry and with their way, the Wells Fargo way, the Bank of America way, the AT&T way, then I have more exposure, more visibility, and more opportunity as a prime.
Great. So I'm going to ask Cynthia, do we have any time left for Q&A? Okay. So now it's your turn to ask the panelists some questions, and I believe I know there's a mic here, and there may be one on that side. So any questions for the panelists? No questions? We did a really good job. Okay. Okay. Okay, just come to the mic, please.
Okay, I want to address the small shaming issue. We've been in business 30 years. We've stayed small intentionally. We've maxed out at 15 people because we like the size that we are. And we've worked, Exelon, done a lot of work with your company. But yours is one of the companies that never said, let me see all of your financials and your firstborn child. And we've worked with you for 15 years.
Wait a minute, who did you talk to?
It wasn't you, Emmett. So anyway, my question is, when we get these RFPs, and sometimes we see it goes to 20, 30, 40 companies, and again, they're asking for the same financials. Well, we intentionally don't grow, but we're a substantial, small size. And some of these companies, you just don't get the business, but you never find out why. And is some of that the idea of, well, we're going to manage our risk because you're only a couple $1 million and that's not enough to do business with us? Because sometimes I just worry about that aspect in terms of providing financials, even if they're level or they go up a little bit or whatever, things don't happen. And I think sometimes that has something to do with it. So,
So I'm going to ask some of the panelists to respond, but one thing is ask for feedback. I don't know of any procurement group that won't sit down and have a conversation after everything's done. So anybody else have any comments on that piece on the financials?
Yeah, I would say ask the question whether or not there is a capital requirement to be considered for the deal. And there are certain categories where there's going to be a minimum level of capitalization that's required. And if you know that up front and you see that you're not hitting that level, then try to get into the conversation around either second tier or whether the company would be willing to partner organizations with the prime after the prime is determined. So I would try to see up front kind of what that capitalization level is, see if they'll be insightful with you on that. And if you see that you fall below that level, then have the conversation about would you be open to exposing your prime to an organization like ours. The other key insight there is the supplier diversity organization. So if you're having that type of experience, finding the person who's accountable for supplier diversity, sharing that with them, and allowing them to kind of work that from a change perspective within the organization should be very helpful as well.
Quick shout out question, because I know that company, and very honestly, first of all, not only were you guys, you were invited and you participated so clean and aggressively, but quite frankly, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We just gave you guys an earful about doing your research. We researched you, and you got the best marks from the WBDC, from the Chicago Women's Business Development Center. You know, so, and that's something that my supplier diversity mama, Hetty Ratner, taught me a long time ago. So, it was here. Yeah, but you did.
Thank you.
Get involved. I was serious. You guys, but your activity level with the organization largely made that possible. Those of you that are just sitting up, you know, how would I say this without saying pimping, you know, but anyway, pimping designations, certifications, get involved. You got to stay involved with your organizations. And that helps us shortcut through some of that stuff.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we get to know you because we see you all the time. Yeah, and we ask questions about your company. And I think, too, there's sometimes in every company, it may be a national deal or a global deal, but if we know that you do work really, really well and there's an opportunity for a local involvement, then we know where we can plug you in. But that's really about knowing you, the company.
That's right.
And it's not going to happen just because we meet you one time at an event.
Right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks, guys.
Any other questions?
Hi. I was wondering if we have submitted to the supplier diversity portal and we have an email address of the point of contact, is there a good next step, or is that email annoying and frustrating, or is there a good way to get in touch and start building that relationship from the ground up?
Yeah. So you want to take it, Kathy?
Sure, why not?
And then I have some comments.
Yeah, and you know, that's like Pandora's box, right? This whole supplier diversity registration portal, and I'm sure there are very strong opinions about it. We, in fact, got rid of ours. We do something that's very just in time when we're at an outreach activity. We have a short reg form, takes about 8 minutes, and then you're done. Because part of the complaint is, it's a lengthy process, it's a black hole, we never hear anything. I would ask, if you're interacting with the supplier diversity lead, I would really ask, like, what is the appropriate path to follow up? do you prefer an email? Do you prefer a phone call? How often should I do it? You know, I'm very candid, and you know, and I know this doesn't apply to all supplier diversity people, present company excluded, I'm sure, but you know, I will tell a person, don't call me, here's why. And because I already know, based on the description you gave me, that we don't have a need for that particular thing at our company. However, I might also refer you over the fence to somebody else who may. So I would be, you know, I was telling somebody earlier today, when you ask questions, try not to ask yes and no questions. Make people give you the very specific information you need so that you can direct your next step. You know, so that would be my suggestion.
Lynn?
And I would also add that the supplier diversity folks, especially the folks here on the panel, they are your friends for sure. And that is your first step to make sure that you have met the requirement. But it has been my experience that that is not necessarily what is going to get you your first piece of business there. So very often I've found it useful for us to work with different associations, industry specific, and that's where we meet the actual people within the organization who do or work around or have that specific need. Because that's how you find out exactly, you know, you kind of get down to the details of here's who needs you, who needs that service or product, and here's why, and you make that connection. So then you're able to then refer back to your supplier diversity folks and say, you know, I was having a conversation with so-and-so in this department, and they voiced this. We started having this conversation, what then would you recommend? Because then they can guide you a lot better. But these folks are your friends, but they're not necessarily the ones that are going to say, here's the opportunity, let me line you up.
Yeah. And I think you fill out the registration at your own risk, right? We try to guide you to say there's something we know is coming up. There's sometime I'm at an event and I know something's coming out the next week or whatever. When you put it in the portal then, it's a quick next step. But there may be another time when we just did a contract. It's going to be 5 years. So really, I tell people if you want to go into our portal, you can. But I try to be honest about what I think the short-term or long-term opportunities are in your area. And that's the best we can do. And then when we see you at different events, there's events all year. So timing is everything. And the portal only gives us a vehicle to say, if we have to send your information or your profile in for an RFQ, it gives us a nice package that you've completed that whets the appetite of that procurement person so you can get an RFQ. That's really what it is.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Hi. I was just wondering, what kind of advice can the panel give for brand new businesses that are trying to get in on RFPs? In many cases, for example, she mentioned something about the financial requirements. Many times there's a requirement that you've been, you know, in business or providing a minimum of 2 years of financials. How can you mitigate that? It's sort of like when you get out of college and you're trying to start with your first new job and you can't get any experience because you don't have any experience. So it kind of puts you in a loop of a catch-22. What is the panel's best advice on how to mitigate that?
I'm just stuck on stupid, you know, again. Amelia, please stand up. Amelia, there you go, thank you. Cynthia? No, please stand up. Sheila Morgan, please stand up. These people we pay them lots of dues. I am a huge advocate for putting them to work for us on your behalf. All right, but you got to spend some time in their offices.
I'm matriculated
that
through.
They can help close that gap.
Okay.
Because I mean, I'm just keeping it 100. I'll return one of their phone calls before I'll return yours. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? Because that's something that if Cynthia calls me and tells me, Emmett, we got a hot one, I'm gonna believe her. Okay. She's been there. You understand? And so that helps. Our research is critical to us making good decisions, therefore getting good deals done. And I don't know if there's not enough sell time. For those of you that are brand new, that's not small shaming or whatever it is. I'm just saying that either you got great promotional budgets or you got a magic something to get you into the inside of the ivory tower, but don't undersell these organizations and their power with us to represent you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody
else have a suggestion?
I have a diverse answer. And you paid your money to be here, so I'm just going to be candid and give the real answer. So for biopharmaceutical, we are not startup friendly.
Yeah, I noticed that.
I noticed that. Very candid. And there's a reason we simply cannot place put that much in a supplier who is not yet proven, who doesn't have a history with other pharma companies. I mean, we just, I started by saying, we're in the business of patients' lives, and so we just don't play around with that. And if you're on the indirect side of the business, obviously that's a little easier to navigate, but, that doesn't prevent me from, I'm all for talking to any supplier, no matter what stage of the business you are in, and I can certainly help, with some advice, some coaching, some mentoring. But in our space, we don't tend to be startup friendly.
Yeah. What about on a tier 2 level? On a sub level or what have you? Are we still going to be scrutinized to that extent?
On a tier 2 level, now there are 3 people in the equation making the decision. So there's us, then there's the prime, and then there's you. And so, but I think you'd be given more consideration, And are you direct or indirect?
Am I direct?
What does your company do?
Marketing.
Okay, so you're on the indirect side of the business or commercial. So that's going to be easier to navigate. But again, you're dealing with larger competition with larger agencies and all that. But we would look at you on a tier 2 on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Okay. I think when you get to companies, the size of the companies on the panel, most times we're going to look for, we're what did you say, startup adverse. However, there's ways that people do get in, and it is really about building relationships, about being able to leverage your current relationships and creating some confidence. So it's going to take more time. But a lot of us, just based on the size of the deals that we do and the risk involved, a lot of times it's really hard. But it's not impossible. And some of that, if you're in a service area particularly, there's some unique skills that you may have that you need to identify that makes us take a second look, particularly in marketing, because that's a very, very competitive area.
Right.
And so everybody's trying to get the best of the best in that space. So it just takes time.
Let me just add to the responses. I want to give you a specific resource that you can tap into. It's wellsfargoworks.com, wellsfargoworks.com. We have set up an environment just for small businesses, and everything that's out there is free. You can go on to Wells Fargo Works. You can complete your business plan at no cost. You can look at business credit tools at no cost. You can also tap into industry-specific research at no cost. And we set that up because we heard from small businesses, just as you're saying now, how do I get my foot in the door? How do I get some of this front stuff done that I need to be helpful? The other thing is the large agencies that probably most of us are working with from a big corporate perspective, they're also focused on developing out their diversity supply chain. So if you'll see me afterward, I want to give you my card and connect you in with one of our agency partners that I think might be very helpful in talking to you from a mentoring perspective. One of the things that's very helpful when you're starting out is to have somebody that's in that industry that you can call and tap into and say, here are the questions that I have, and oh, by the way, can you bring me along, right, as you're doing some things, or maybe even let me do some work that's pro bono to show what I can do initially to get your foot in the door. Get that foot in the door, build that relationship, and as you've heard all day, overperform when you have the opportunity to. I'm not going to small shame. You see me, I'm going to give you a card.
And stay engaged with the agencies. I don't think we can overemphasize that enough, because if you're showing up enough at the WBDC office, you're going to get some of that coaching and mentoring, as well as the resources that were just given to you.
Lynn?
Just add to that, we talked a lot about, and here the emphasis has really been about doing business with some of the larger entities and doing tier 2. One of the things that really helped us as we were starting out was realizing that there was a much broader base for business. So there's not just large corporations, and it's not just small corporations. There are all of these mid-sized corporations that you can do business with. Because the truth of the matter is, while you do have to have 2 to 3 years of experience, you have to eat in that time.
Exactly. That was my point.
Right, right. But that means that you will then start to take a look at, you know, it's not just the Exelons or the BPs or the AbbVies. There's several layers of businesses that are well established and that need all of those services, and they're not as big, they're not billions of dollars, but they are maybe millions of dollars, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, who need those services, or thousands, exactly. And that is a great place to play, to get the experience, and you might find some tier 2 opportunities, or you might find, hey, I actually have a better chance at getting this business than I do, because maybe my sales cycle there might be 2 or 3 months instead of 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
Now,
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You
had
had
a comment.
one more addition to what Lynn was talking about. When you're new, less than 2 years, you're scrappy, you don't have a lot of time to spend on RFPs that you're not going to be successful.
A very good point.
So it really is important for you to understand the market and their threshold. What is their appetite? Wells Fargo, maybe not as risk adverse as others, or risky. Look at the markets that will, because you don't have the time or the money or resources, I'm sure, to spend hours on RFPs, that you're really just, you don't fall within their criteria out of the gate.
Thank you. That's an excellent point.
Okay, as we end, I want each of you to give maybe 2 or 3 words that is your parting advice to this audience. No more than that.
Thank
it's got to
you
be
very
quick.
much.
Regina?
Great time for women-owned businesses, growth in numbers, growth in dollars. I love the concepts of partnering and being very confident in your offerings, and really look forward to the future.
Okay, Regina?
I would say, to echo what's been said, just once again, know your markets and be persistent. Be persistent.
Kathy?
If you're interested in biopharmaceutical, be patient. It is a longer sales cycle.
Lynn?
You have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen very carefully and learn to communicate well.
Emmett?
This was my dream.
And Michelle?
I always try to tell women, don't be afraid to be the B word. Be bold.
Let's give our panel a hand, please. Thank you. You've been a great panel. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And with that, I think Georgia's going to close for us today.
Just pretend I'm Georgia. What a great discussion. Debra, thank you for moderating. I know that it's tough to do, and you did it extremely well. Michelle, Emmett, Lynn, Kathy, Regina, and I don't stutter. I thank you for your time, for your insight. This was terrific. And I took a lot of notes, and I wanted to summarize, but I think what I want to do is I want to just remind everyone that you were given a lot of good information. I was given good information because we at the WBDC work in a small business. So we can apply a lot of those skills to us, and we can also take your counsel when we're talking to you about investing in us. So thank you very, very much. Now, we've all had a great time, and we've worked really, really hard. We've learned today, but in addition to growing and learning, I think it's also very important that we celebrate our successes. And that brings us to the celebratory part of this evening. And what I would like is, which is my favorite part, and I hope that you agree with me. So what I'd like us to do is to continue our discussion by going to our celebration, and let's just continue with Emmett's dream. So please join me in O'Hare rooms 3 and 4. It's the same room we had the luncheon today. And a big thank you again to our panel, and we look forward to chatting more in the next room. Thank you.